So, within the article Enhancing Adolescents' Comprehension of Text by Building vocabulary knowledge is described to be a very powerful tool when it comes to students comprehending a piece of text. And before one even begins to think that it only happens with younger students, no. It doesn't have to be the younger group of students that have difficulty in understanding exactly what a text reads due to low vocabulary knowledge. It can also be middle school children and even high schoolers that struggle in comprehension because they haven't properly developed their vocabulary knowledge. Based on research, every 100 unknown words a student comes across in a reading, he or she will at least learn 15 of those 100. Therefore, starting vocabulary development young will then increase their vocabulary knowledge as they age, and then without the help of a dictionary or other student, they will begin to infer word meanings on their own. This then leads to better and quicker text comprehension. However, with this article, we are looking at middle school and high school students. So, how do we really help these students that are within this age range? As educators, we need to provide explicit instruction for students, handouts on new vocabulary, different ways of exposures, and keeping students active, engaged in learning while also making sure that their needs are being met in ways that the students understand the vocabulary knowledge need to be done. While explicitly demonstrating vocabulary instruction, the new vocabulary should resemble other words and concepts that the students are familiar with or are currently learning. So, something students gather from a word previously known within the unknown word that they are learning to aid them in deciphering the new word is called morphology. And with morphology plays a huge part in learning vocabulary knowledge. Morphology instruction should not stop for 1 week and then pick back up the next. No, morphology should be used every time. Teachers need to provide guided and independent practice to get students involved. If they're not involved within the work, they aren't able to use their higher levels of thinking. And that's what they need to be doing. They need to be allowed to use their higher levels of thinking. Guided and independent practice should also be walked through during or even after to make sure that students are developing the concept of vocabulary knowledge along with comprehension of text. However, what do we as educators do with students with disabilities? Well, educators may need the help of a teacher assistant and may need to develop new strategies if a teacher assistant isn't available to help. This will aid the student to find the meaning of words differently than those without disabilities. So, like the morphology method, morphology aids in the increase of students' word identification, spelling, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. However, for students with disabilities, it may not do that with them. This would be one of the many times an educator will need to either make modifications or come up with a different route of learning for those students with different needs. With middle and high school students, vocabulary and comprehension skills require students to think on a higher level. If these students do not have the proper practice and past instruction in understanding their grades will truly suffer. And we as educators do not want that. Educators need to provide ample opportunities to improve adequate, direct, and explicit vocabulary instruction. Higher level thinking exercises and practice, text-based vocabulary, morphology-based instruction, as well as independently teaching student strategies to tackle such complex words. Without that, these students will not be able to comprehend a piece of text that we give them. So including all of these things will, again, aid those students into learning how to comprehend text with adequate vocabulary knowledge. So here are some steps for educators to follow that I gathered from the article and made steps to go along with what the article was saying. Step 1. The teacher provides students with a term including its definition, an example from the book, along with the description, explanation, or example of the term. Step 2. Students will try to incorporate the term's description, explanation, or example into their own life or words. Step 3. Students will share and teacher will critique if need be. Step 4. The teacher will extend and refine understanding of the words by engaging students in guided and independent practices that aid them in adding these new terms to their vocabulary knowledge. Step 5. Periodically ask students to discuss the terms with one another after terms are taught and throughout the text reading. Step 6. Teacher will allow the students to be involved in activities that enable them to play with the terms and reinforce word knowledge.